curious where you first learned about open source. Was it even called open source at the time when you first got in touch with it?
No, it was, we didn't come up with the name open source until later. But so I mentioned that startup I was working at where I was using my Perl experience. So I went, I taught Perl at the local Linux user group, and that was kind of where I first got sort of in touch with the community. First hanging out with them and then, kind of teaching a class there. But then I went to this Perl conference and I met Larry and Gloria Wall. Larry Wall was the creator of Perl. And Larry and Gloria, in addition to being just absolutely wonderful people, also had a background in linguistics. And they suggested I get involved in the Perl project itself. Specifically, Larry invited me to join the design team for a new version of the language. So I did. It wasn't like I didn't have any consciousness of making a big step. It was just, oh, this looks interesting. I'll do this for a while. But then, so I was involved in the design team, and then I was project manager for Perl, and then I was president of the Perl Foundation, and then chief architect of a project called Parrot, which was like an implementation of Perl and Python and Ruby and PHP and like dynamic languages in general. So it just kind of like, it started with nothing more than a casual, someone who was involved was kind enough to have a conversation with me and suggest, hey, you should think about getting involved. And that was really all it took.
So I assume that that we can say that your first experience was a nice and good experience in that community and then in that environment, right?
It was, yeah. It was a very positive experience.
What was the time frame?
90s, 2000s, kind of. Okay. I was on the board of the Perl Foundation until, I think, 2017. So a long time, but I was not involved in Perl development anymore. At that point, I was just serving on the board still.
So when you were invited to get involved, like how long did it take for you to realize that this is something that you will stay involved in? Like what made you stay?
It was never a thing where I was like, all right, I'm committed. I'm going to do this for 50 years. It's always been a thing that it's just, the people are great. So having good people to work with is a big deal. The interesting problems to solve, like my brain likes puzzles. So like, it's always like a little stubbornness of curiosity for like the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And also like a sense of making progress on that problem you're trying to solve. Like, it gives you this satisfaction that, this was worthwhile. And then when you can also see it having an impact on technology as a whole or society, or, you can see those extra impacts, that also helps too, because you feel like you're using your time for something that's important, it's valuable, that matters.
And you were also involved in other projects and communities as well, and being on the board of other foundations. Can you mention a few examples?
So the Perl, Python, Debian, Ubuntu, OpenStack would be like the really big ones. A bunch of others, but either I made smaller contributions to them, like Linux, only a very tiny amount, or Linux kernel, only a very tiny amount, or others, like you wouldn't recognize the name if you heard it anyway. So it's like, I spent years on Parrot, but like, usually it's people who are like compilers, people know what Parrot is, and other people are like, what? What's that? It wasn't, the name didn't catch on. Only the name Perl remains as recognizable. Bunch of things over the years. Some technical, some leadership, both technical leadership and management type leadership, and then some more like, executive board and like president, chair of the board, things like that as well. Sort of a mixture of hats.